Hey guys, thank you for joining. Wanted to quickly go over the rough agenda for today. So first off, we want to kick off with some discussions on a set of potential solutions designed to strengthen the protocol and restore affected LP funds. A discussion thread was posted by Steven just a few hours ago on Discourse discussing these solutions. It's mostly high level as a temperature check to get the conversation started. And on this call, Mark will give a high-level overview of the concepts behind these potential solutions. Following that, Glenn will give an overview of other restorative measures that are already underway. Some are in the initial discussion phase in Discourse, and some have already been passed by the DAO in the past 2 weeks. These measures include increased VBNT burn rates, expanding trading liquidity with unused TKN liquidity, and an idea around developing a bridge back into the protocol for LPs who have withdrawn at a loss while BNT distribution is paused. We'll conclude the call by answering some community submitted questions, and heads up that if we don't get to everything in about an hour, we'll host another call to focus on these community questions, and we'll be posting the answers in the Discourse thread where the questions were originally submitted. So I'd like to hand things over to Mark to introduce the potential set of solutions posted to governance and kick off a sort of temperature check to get feedback on this initial proposal. Mark?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay. I'm going to assume that you can hear me okay. My headphones are screwing off a little bit. But yeah, so we're basically now at the end of a fairly long brainstorming period, thinking about all the different ways that the protocol and its current setup can be used to address the effective deficit that the protocol has. And I think that we've really started to orbit around a collection of concepts that'll have a lot of things in common. And I think that that's generally a good thing, because when the returns start to diminish that way, when you're thinking about a problem, it generally means you're getting closer and closer to something like an optimal solution. And so the two general concepts that we have are all sort of based on the same idea of pivoting the vortex towards something a little bit more general in nature. The first one is proposing to use a DAI distribution model. So in a similar manner to how the vortex today converts things to BBNT, we can also use it to convert things into other tokens. And similar to the refi philosophy, we can return tokens to users, their effective yield in tokens like DAI or ETH. And I think DAI is probably the preferable way to do this. It has some technical challenges. For example, things like epochs will probably be necessary, and also the way that the DAI is obtained from the fees that the vortex collects is something else we need to consider. So that's one option. And then the other option would be to, instead of using the vortex just to buy and burn BBNT, we can also use it to establish an effective insurance fund. And so this is conceptually very similar to the way that Bancor operates today. But instead of using BNT burning and BNT minting as the mechanism through which the insurance is achieved, instead it will actually accumulate a literal insurance fund. So this could be denominated, for example, in a volatile asset and a stable asset like ETH and DAI. And instead of liquidity providers receiving their IL protection in BNT, which we know is extremely problematic, they could receive their insurance payouts in ETH and DAI instead. And both of these options are, like I said, conceptually related at the contract level. And I'm preparing an educational sort of document, sort of a tutorial for how to think about these things. And so these are sort of just two examples of how this general framework can be used to achieve the sorts of effects that we're looking for. And then after that, we'll be focusing on some of the more, the more aggressive fee earning strategies that we have planned for the rest of the Bancor 3 rollout. I think that that's probably that's where I'd like to leave it. But just with regards to the Bancor 3 rollout stuff and what fee-earning strategies that we had in mind, one is a protocol arbitrage strategy. So this would essentially be, what I've referred to previously as something like Bancor keepers, where the protocol actually has a competitive advantage against other AMMs and can use its own funds to arbitrage the rest of Ethereum. And this is, I think, extremely interesting because protocol-owned MEV is something that I think is going to be one of the core components of DeFi moving forward. Because at the moment, the most profitable thing to do in DeFi is MEV, and most of the protocols are kind of losing the battle to MEV practices. And I think that it makes sense to bring those in-house and give back to the communities that allow these kinds of activities to take place. And then, of course, the most profitable activity in all of DeFi is liquidations. And this would mean that I think that it makes sense for the Bancor protocol to be able to use its own resources to either liquidate other protocols, but also that we should offer borrowing and lending internally and allow the protocol to perform liquidations in a responsible way that doesn't involve huge liquidation cascades, for example. So I think both of these things are very attractive ways to really bolster the fee-earning potential of the protocol. But in the immediate term, we need to find something that is going to stabilize the system and continue to offer an attractive, use case for liquidity providers. And I think that either the DAI distribution model, the DAI remittance model, and the insurance fund idea are both interesting, but it's not limited to that, right? These are just two examples for what I think is sort of the main mechanism that we're looking to harness. And so I am very interested to see how the community responds to both of these ideas and to incorporate some of their feedback into exactly how these kinds of things would work. So these aren't 100% spec'd out ideas. They're just it's basically the end of the brainstorming period, and I think a very positive outlook in terms of the structure and the type of technology and what's possible in smart contracts. So I'd actually like to invite Glenn now to speak about some of the other DAO proposals that we've been inspired by and are still reading about. Sort of bring those to the attention of everyone listening. So Glenn, if you're here, please make yourself known.
Sure. Hope my mic is okay. I'll start with some of the proposals that have recently passed the Bancor DAO. First one being the BNT burn increase. Essentially, in version 2.1, we had the Vortex burner set to 15%, and the Bancor DAO voted to increase this to 100% over the course of a few weeks. So it moved to 30% first, now it's at 70%, and eventually in version 2.1, it's going to move to 100%. This should happen next week. The next thing that also happened was that in version 3, the Vortex burner moved to 30%. You should note, or the community should be aware that in version 3 of the protocol, even though we're collecting BNT for the Vortex is not live yet. So this BNT is right now just sitting there in a separate wallet to potentially be burned in the future. The other proposal that passed was the cancellation of the cooldown and the 0.25% withdrawal fee for LPs that were withdrawing from the protocol. Essentially, these two measures were put in place because we had an insurance mechanism, and it was a way to prevent people from exploiting the insurance mechanism. Now that the insurance mechanism has been disabled, the Bancor DAO decided to remove both of these mechanisms that were in place. Next proposal that passed was BNT liquidity mining rewards. We had roughly set aside, I want to say 30 million BNT rewards that were supposed to be distributed over the course of 50 years to BNT LPs. Recent events sort of led the Bancor DAO to realize that these inflationary rewards are not good for the health of the protocol. So the community essentially voted to kill these rewards. We also had the emergency action proposal. Essentially, this was ratifying the emergency action that the multisig took on the 19th of last month which disable BNT distribution. The community essentially passed this proposal as well, and the emergency actions were left in place. The other stuff that sort of passed, this one was a proposal that essentially reduced the vortex payment that was paid to the initiator down to 2%. So someone that was triggering the V2.1 vortex, they would either get 100 BNT or 10%, whichever one was the lowest amount. The Bancor DAO essentially voted to reduce this amount to 2%. So now going forward, whoever triggers the vortex burner, they're going to get either 100 BNT or 2% of what's in the wallet to be burned, right? Whichever is the lesser amount of both. So those are the proposals that have passed the Bancor DAO. Now there's some preliminary discussions in the governance forums at the moment, as well as some proposals that are up for voting in Snapshot. The first one being there is some discussions about burning BNT directly. So there's some opinions about whether we should burn BBNT, BNT, or a combination of both in 50-50. So if you have any thoughts about this, please, we ask that you go to the forums and submit your feedback. And obviously the community can then have a discussion about how to move forward. The other proposal is to route the vortex burner through the V3 pool. So right now we have a VBNT BNT pool in version 2.1, and we also have a VBNT BNT pool in version 3 of the protocol. The version 3 pool has a lot more BBNT liquidity. So this proposal is seeking to route the burner through that pool so that we get less price impact and therefore better outcome when we're running BBNT. So that's up for voting now. There is another proposal. This one came from me. Essentially, this will allow us to grow the trading liquidity in a lot of the pools in version 3 of the protocol, which didn't grow to the full pre-approved amount that the Bancor DAO already voted for. So when a token project gets onboarded, we approve a certain amount of trading liquidity. Some of these pools have not grown to that full amount. And what happened now is that because we disable deposits, usually when deposits happen is when the pool grows. This proposal essentially is asking the community to let us do this via an external trigger so that deposits are disabled and we can still grow the liquidity in the pools. Lastly, there's another proposal for a repatriation act. Essentially, some LPs that withdrew from the protocol at a loss, they can potentially come back to the protocol, right? We're sort of like a bridge back into the protocol to participate in any of the recovery plans that we have in place for the future of the protocol. So a lot of these proposals came from the community. We do ask that you please submit your feedback in the governance forums. And I think this is pretty much it as to what we have. So I'll hand it over to Q&A next, and yeah, we'll take it from there.
Jen, I think, are you on? Oh, there you are. Question speak. Cool. Jen, can you speak?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So, you know, obviously the calls right now are not, you know, we're not taking the live questions from the community, but obviously all of their questions and feedback and suggestions, all of that matters. So we created a discussion on Discourse and invited everybody to, or encouraged them really to just submit all of their questions and give us the opportunity to speak on them here during the call still. Can you guys hear me? I just saw a message that I'm super low.
I think that we're challenging Telegram's ability to deal with 132 participants, but I think it's fine. We can still hear you.
Okay, I'll speak a little bit louder. We're just gonna jump right into it. So Mark, is there any chance of a bailout?
I mean, I'm not sure. It's you know, I can't, you know, I have no. I know it's been a common sticking point in the channels just recently that like the foundation or someone else should offer a bailout. You know, obviously I've discussed this with the foundation because, you know, it's something that's come up frequently, but it's not something that I have any sort of inside knowledge on or anything else. It's really up to them. I don't have any influence over that. We haven't opened up any conversations with anyone else about it. But yeah, if someone thinks that I don't know, like if they have a philanthropic individual or organization in mind that they think would be appropriate to open that discussion with, then please, by all means, go ahead and open that discussion. I hope it goes well.
Okay. Thank you. The next one, you know, and some of these were obviously submitted before we had discussed and posted the 2 possible solutions to Discourse this morning. So I'm still going to visit them. I still think that it's important that we address them for the community members who submitted them. Will impermanent loss protection be reinstated? And I know that this is kind of an iffy one because ultimately, like, it is up to the DAO, you know, so I don't know if they're looking for maybe just your opinion on this or, you know, what we were thinking as far as the possible solutions.
Yeah, so I think, you know, obviously that is the thing that our project is known for, right? And I would be making a hypocrite out of myself if I said that we should give up on it. And I don't think that that's something that we want to do. I think that as a project that is seeking to, you know, decentralize liquidity provision and come up with a way to ensure liquidity providers against this kind of, you know, this kind of, you know, market making risk that they're exposed to with other systems is absolutely something that we don't want to, you know, we don't want to concede. But with regards to, you know, will ILP just be like reinstated? Like, are we just going to flip a switch and turn it back on? I don't think that is a. I don't think that would be a considered choice. But if the DAO wants it, right? If at some point everyone thinks, you know, it doesn't make sense to not have it anymore, and we should just turn it back on and hope for the best. Obviously, that's something that the community can propose and vote for. I wouldn't support it myself. I think that we do need to take this opportunity to revise and come up with something that isn't susceptible to sort of bank run problems that we've experienced just recently. But it's not my decision to make, right? I will keep working on proposals. I think that, you know, the core contributors together as a group and together with the community who are constantly, you know, providing feedback and helping us grind out some of these feature sets, that we can come up with something that does closely resemble ILP and that we can recreate that feeling of protection and safety that we know had a really great market fit. I think it's a tragedy that we can't offer it in the format that we did, but I think that we've learned a lot from the situation that we found ourselves in, and I would like ILP to be reinstated in some form, but that doesn't mean just flipping a switch like next week and putting it back the way it was. I think that we need to make it more robust, I think.
Right. That makes complete sense. It would, I mean, bring us right back to where it was before the emergency action was taken and in the same exact situation. It kind of leads into our next question, which is, how are you going to promote anything if the protocol dies and BNT price goes straight to zero?
Well, I mean, that's precisely the point of the emergency intervention, I think, is that, right, you know, the question is, you know, do we just stand back and watch everything go up in flames, or do we take a more proactive approach to it? And, you know, I was very heartened to see that the community decided to uphold the emergency actions that were taken. And I am much more optimistic about the future of the project, you know, by refusing, right, to let the BNT price go straight to zero. I think no one benefits from this. I know that there have been, and it's not clear to me whether or not some of the feedback that we've been receiving from people that are legitimately, you know, liquidity providers or not. And that's not to say that your opinion is discredited if you're not a liquidity provider by any means. But I think that some of the arguments that I've heard that we should have just, you know, let it run itself into the ground and then, you know, build something from scratch, I think is, you know, I think that would have been the cruelest possible way to go about managing the situation. So yeah, the answer to the question is, if the protocol dies and BNT goes straight to zero, there's nothing to promote, right? We would have no project. And so I'm glad that we rescued it, and I think that we're in a good position now to come out swinging rather than just kind of throw our hands up and say it's too hard and let's just let it die. That's
right.
That's just not what I'm about.
Awesome, thank you. Next one is Timeframe, and I know that it's kind of like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place because everybody wants a time frame, but then they're upset if you don't reach that sort of goal or that timing that you gave them, but they're asking about a time frame. So
yeah,
it's
so
okay to say no, we won't make it until X. We need Y more days, and it's possible to, they're saying it must be possible in one way or another to determine how long things will take, and maybe giving a little insight as to what those things are that need to be done would give kind of a better idea of the timing, maybe.
Yeah, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to discuss like what some of the technical challenges look like, especially in the context of the two different like general concepts that we are proposing for the DAO to consider, but also remembering that we want to help form the solution with active community members, right? People that have a pretty good idea for what's feasible at a smart contract level, and bringing on some of those suggestions and helping to round something out. But with regards to the DAI distributor, for example, so you stake your tokens and then you get distributed DAI once a month or once a week or something like that. That would require a few the potential implementation challenges associated with that are profound. So it's not unprecedented, though, that there are plenty of protocols that have this kind of epoch distribution of revenue model. But for our system, it's pretty complicated. There would also be, so in addition to those kinds of staking contracts with epochs, there would also have to be some way to measure what people are entitled to. And these things aren't necessarily clear right now, right? Like, do we do everything based off the current TVL of the protocol as it stands, so effectively the pro rata share that people have of the vault balances, or do we use their protected balances?
Right.
And if we're using the protected balances, are there exploit vectors there that we need to control for? These kinds of things, as you sort of dig into them, they can sort of lead you down a rabbit hole where you find more and more security issues or implementation challenges that you weren't expecting to find. And so with the DAI distribution, I can tell you that everything in that proposal, or everything in that idea, it's not really a proposal just yet, but everything contained within that idea that we're currently exploring is very easy to do, with that one little box of, okay, how do we distribute the DAI, to whom and how much? That is kind of an open question, and we really need to sort of dig into it to work out what those kinds of challenges are. And so over the course of working with Bancor, I've kind of learned that there are things that will take a long time, and there are things that you don't know how long they will take. And in this case, there's nothing there that we know will take a long time, right? When we were developing version 3, there were smart contracts we were looking at and thinking, okay, like this will take a few weeks or a few months or something to get ready. And then there was some other parts in there where we're like, like that's an interesting problem. We've never really dealt with that before. And as we dig into it, we might find, that there's no real precedent, there's no real sort of code base anywhere that we can derive inspiration from for how to do this. It's going to be completely from scratch. And those ones are the things that end up usually costing a lot more time than you expected. And with this DAI distributor, I can tell you that if we do move to an epoch system, at least we know that is that there's good precedent for it. And so I would say that would take like maybe a month or something like that. But then the unknown component is, what is the logic going to look like with regards to how to distribute it and to whom? And I have no idea how long that will take, because you need to first develop the algorithm, and then try and implement it in a way that's compatible with the EVM. And so that's that's why I now understand why it's so difficult to give timelines on things. But this isn't like the kinds of things that we're considering, like the ideas that we're trying to describe and explain to the community. They are the things that have been sort of filtered out for feasibility, right? There are obviously like dozens of ideas that we threw out because the scale of them, the amount of radical changes that it would introduce, the re-education that would be necessary, would mean that it is just not acceptable as a solution in the interim. So
Right.
Just know that the things that we are trying to discuss, or the discussions that we are opening, are for things that we think won't take that much time, right? These are the fastest feasible solutions that are likely to give the best possible outcome for the time period that we spend on them, so that we can get, so that we can launch ourselves into the actual like aggressive fee earning features that we would much rather be working on.
It's still, I mean, right from the beginning though, you want to be able to provide like all of the information that we can to the DAO members and to the community to even have that discussion. And without knowing what sort of time frame we're even looking at that, if there's a lot being discussed and being suggested to possibly modify that or improve the solutions, once that is kind of concluded, then we might have a better idea of a time frame, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think that what we need to focus on over the next week or so is finding out which one of these ideas, and remember they're all related, so we kind of know how to develop for them, but specifically what type of product activity, right, it generates, what the actual value proposition is to people that are using it. Getting an idea for what people like the most, I think, is the most important thing. And once we start to align with liquidity providers on what solution they want, then we can start, peeling apart precisely, what the development schedule should look like. But just know that it's, we will be working on it very, very quickly, right? It will be, we are as motivated as the community is.
Right.
to get everything back on track and working the way that it should. So yeah, it's I can't give a timeline yet. I think that we should stay focused on making sure that we are aligned as a community, what we want to develop, and then after we've kind of ironed out exactly what the product features are going to look like and what their behavior is over the coming week or so, then we can start developing timelines and things like that. But I think more than ever during this part of it, we should probably have more more regular syncs with the community to update them on specifically, what smart contract development milestones have been met and that kind of thing. I would like to have a much more open conversation and sort of update schedule as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Okay, thank you. Next one, and I'm just reading these as they were submitted. So please ask Mark what the plan is if a TKN significantly appreciates in value versus BNT, causing a larger, potentially insurmountable deficit. We understand the team needs time to implement a solution, but many are impatient as these major TKN milestones are fast approaching for Bancor's largest pools.
Right.
I mean, they're voicing a concern here and kind of asking a question as well,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's that's certainly I understand the concern. I think that there's this expectation, and whether or not it's a realistic expectation or not, but things like the ETH merge is going to cause the ETH price to skyrocket, or that CCIP or link staking is going to cause their prices to skyrocket. No one knows the future. Often, a lot of bullish news is actually accompanied by a decline in price. Usually, this is actually how markets tend to react to things. So, for example, at the most recent Netflix, stakeholder meeting or the stakeholders report, there was a 15% increase in revenue, right? So Netflix is actually making more money than it ever has, and that caused the stock price to drop by 55%. So, there's really no way to know what markets are going to do. But yeah, this is certainly part of the this is certainly part of the issue. Whether or not we need to move towards something that's more managed. So one of the things that we might be able to do after we, we start bringing, bringing these solutions front and center is that we can actually potentially limit the IL or the deficit levels on specific pools or on every pool to within certain margins. So, for example, if the deficit exceeds like 10% or something like that, we can just refuse to sell any more of that token and repurpose it for things like borrowing and lending until it comes back up to its high watermark level, things like that. But yeah, it's something that is very, very difficult to predict because it requires knowledge of the future, right? In this case, if we knew what the markets were going to do, then there wouldn't really be a need for for risk management. Now, whether or not it's more likely that things like ETH and Link are going to move versus the rest of the market it remains to be shown. I think I'd say that it's a legitimate concern, and yeah, something that we should start discussing with regards to limiting the deficit levels and things like that. And I know how to do it. But yeah, it's whoever asked this question is very wise to ask it. And whether or not we want to shut down trading on a pool because the deficit is growing too quickly or past a certain threshold is something that we should probably consider.
It sounds like you kind of almost already have, unless that was just a spur of the moment thing about talking about setting the parameters and collateral.
No, there was a very early draft of V3 that actually worked exactly that way. So after Uniswap V3 was released, one of the things that I realized was that there's kind of this assumption, right, with their capital efficiency argument, that people have more capital than is being deployed to those bonding curves, right, within those particular ranges. And so, and you can even read it in like Dan Robinson's and Hayden's tweets that, instead of providing $1 million to an AMM, you can just provide $100 and then put, the rest of your capital in Aave, right, and deploy the capital that way. And so this is kind of originally where the borrowing lending solution was inspired. And originally version 3 was a borrowing lending protocol combined with an AMM. But instead of providing concentrated liquidity the way that Uniswap V3 does it, we would instead lend out either side of the pool, so that the trading range is kind of maintained within a healthy margin. And this also means that if as the liquidity moves out of range, the deficit levels are kept within a very tight level. Nice. So it would, rather than having to use 2 different protocols or 3 different protocols to deploy your capital, the idea was that the Bancor could be the single protocol that deploys it in all 3 or 4 or whatever of those different situations that it could. And so, yeah, that concept of forcing the deficit levels to obey a particular, to be confined within a known threshold, and something that is much easier to ensure, is an old concept. It was one of the first design principles behind an early draft of version 3. So yeah, I have thought about that for a very long time.
Cool, very cool. Thank you. What is the token utility for BNT right now when the pools are all paused for deposits? And apart from burning VBNT, what are other potential solutions to support the price of BNT? Kind of goes.
Well, that's very difficult for me to answer. So this is in general, any questions that are concerning the BNT price, right. People need to realize that.
I asked it. You can't answer it. You can just say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't want to disrespect the question by just refusing to answer, because I think that there are another couple of things in there that certainly should be discussed. So things like, what is the purpose of BNT while deposits are disabled? Right. I mean, the truth is that while deposits are disabled, there is kind of a disparity between the people that are inside the protocol and people that are outside the protocol. But things like the vortex mechanism, which is continuing to deflate BNT. Even while ILP is turned off, still means that there is this sort of, there is this the ability of the protocol to absorb BNT from secondary markets and destroy it so that it's not continuing to add to sell pressure is something that people will always speculate on. And I'm not advising or suggesting that anyone speculate on BNT. I'm just pointing out, matter of fact, that people speculate on stuff. And this is one of the reasons why people speculate on BNT and BBNT. So I think that, I do need to stress that anything that I say about BNT price is, is something that could land me in jail. And so I can't talk about it in any direct way. What I can say is that there is a ratio of assets in the pool, right? TKN side and the BNT side. And what we need to, be aware of is that, the fastest way to address the deficit is to redistribute that ratio, right? Or re-equilibrate the ratio. So bringing the TKN side back up to parity with where it should be is the most important priority that we face as a community. And making sure that BNT is something that continues to maintain its attractiveness and its marketability is obviously something that we can't afford to dispose of.
Perfect. And it's paired with every TKN on the protocol. Did you say that?
Correct.
I mean, like as far as
I didn't, but I assumed that everyone on the call already knows that.
Okay. All right. Next question. The protocol only generates, a little less than $1 million a month in trading fees. This kind of goes back to the new solutions that were posted on Discourse or proposed possible solutions. Is there any other revenue stream that can help resume the impermanent loss protection? So kind of something that we've touched on. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit or address that question specifically.
Yeah, sure. So one of the, during this brainstorming session, early on, a lot of my attention was on just make as much fees as possible, right? What are the things that we can do to make as much fees as possible? And looking at the, sort of the AMM landscape in general, not just Bancor, because, it's interesting because, one of the things that we're facing as a project is the fact that because we reveal what deficits are, we've got this huge amount of attention on us. But, you can look at the deficits of any of the AMMs and they're orders of magnitude higher than ours. Right, so like if you do a historical analysis, for example, of Uniswap V3, their deficits are in the billions of dollars, which is just an interesting, it's an interesting paradigm. I think that in a way the organization of the version 3 contracts and the way that Bancor assumes that it has a responsibility to liquidity providers is one of the things that we're struggling with. And I'm not. That's not making an apology or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's, I think that we've made an example of ourselves as an AMM project and how difficult it is to be profitable. And so I think, in examining who is actually making profits out of AMMs, I have concluded that it's mostly the minor extractable value. Like this is the majority of the value in DeFi is actually not DeFi protocols, but people abusing them. I think that with regards especially to some of the largest pools, one of the things we can do is actually bring some of that MEV revenue inside the protocol by doing something like an arbitrage contract. So I've solved this equation for sort of a generic form of triangular arbitrage between any 3 liquidity pools. And this is necessary because that triangular arbitrage would begin and end at their Bancor's pools. So you might have something like BNT ETH and BNT USDC as being the start and the end point. And that means that the protocol itself can arbitrage a ETH USDC pool somewhere else in the ecosystem. Now, of course, arbitrage is an extremely competitive industry, and we've got bots constantly competing with each other. But one of the ways that we can give the Bancor protocol an edge, for example, is to force the trading fee on some of these more prominently arbitrage pools relatively high, and then allow the protocol to perform swaps with them against other protocols in the ecosystem while ignoring the fees or paying a slightly lower fee. And this means that effectively the IL of other protocols becomes the anti-IL of Bancor, right? If IL is, IL isn't caused by arbitrage, but it is equal to it. And so as long as the protocol itself is the thing that's actively trading against other protocols in order to extract IL from that part of the economy, then that's something that would accumulate for Bancor liquidity providers. And this is the most profitable way to use an AMM, right? Is to be that kind of active trading influence. This is something that I believe is actually easily automatable and would also be something that could drive more staking value to BNT, because I think after a contract like this is in place, the question is who's responsible for it, or who has access to it. Obviously, smart contracts can't activate themselves, so you still need to have someone there who is responsible for pushing it, similar to our Vortex contract. And so I think it makes sense to require someone to stake a bunch of BNT against these contracts, similar to like how Chainlink does. And then say, okay, fine, you have the, you have permission to use this arbitrage contract, and you can collect a small amount of, a very small proportion of the arbitrage value for yourself. Then if you behave badly, that there will be a slashing risk associated with using it. And this is a paradigm that is already, I'd say, well understood and well accepted by the DeFi community. And I think that it would be a really interesting way to generate, massive fees compared to the sort of passive arbitrage that, the passive trading and passive arbitrage that the protocol already experiences. And just remember that these things are additive, right? We can do it for certain pools, or we can, section off the protocol and use use other models that I have spoken about years ago, but we never implemented. To make this thing as streamlined as we possibly can. But these are the types of things that I'm thinking about, right? Because I'm no longer convinced that the protocol can be passive. I think that we've seen a full bull market cycle and a full bear market cycle, and the overwhelming majority of the profits that these things generate go to people that aren't even staked in the protocol, but people that are just trading against it. So I think that it's a new paradigm, something that DeFi has learned the hard way. But that doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. So I think if we remain critical and we remain creative, that we've already been shown how to make things profitable. We just need to learn how to internalize that.
Right.
So I think that we get to hit we get to push a lot of different buttons here with an implementation like this, both in terms of profitability for liquidity providers, but also things like the demand use case for BNT and what specific function is within the network. And I'm pretty excited to bring this kind of stuff to fruition. And like I said, I've already got the equations that solve for it and that could be implemented using smart contracts alone. So it's this is the way that I want to take Bancor.
So we should be hearing more about these, or can hope to, at least on Discourse, and maybe have calls around them as well.
Oh, I was planning to start writing proposals for this stuff as soon as I got back from Texas, right, from Consensus. And I was only home for like 16 hours before I started having to deal with the stuff that we're now wrestling with. So it's I am already very well
prepared.
These ideas are they've been generated over a very long period of time. I don't want anyone to think that we're kind of that I'm pulling this stuff out of my butt at the last minute or something like that. This is part of the phase 2 and phase 3 rollout for Bancor that the team, that the collective, even particular community members have been collaborating with me on for a long time. The David Meister, for example, he and I have been discussing a token launcher platform for Bancor for like more than a year, and we've shared some key insights with each other, and I think that the fruit of that of those conversations is something that I'm very excited and I feel very ready to begin acting on. I want to open these discussions up and get community feedback as soon as possible. So there's no shortage of good ideas to offer things that nothing else in the industry has, and that would drive massive fees and revenue for the protocol and liquidity providers. It's just like unfortunate, this like super unfortunate timing that we had to have this intervening emergency action in the middle of it, right when we were about to begin working on it.
I understand. Okay, I see a lot of talk in the Telegram. I was just pinged in there, and it actually goes right along with my next question. So they're speaking about liquidity, right? In order for these new solutions to work, and we're talking about how Bancor needs liquidity. And the question that was posed previously in the discussion on Discourse was if Bancor needs liquidity to earn more trading fees, and why haven't we opened for deposits yet? And how
that's a good question.
that liquidity?
Yeah. So obviously, like attracting the liquidity is going to, we have a lot of work to do with rebuilding confidence and trust, as many projects have. I think that in the grand scheme of things, we've seen similar projects to ours suffer from far worse consequences than anything that we're currently weathering. That's not to make light of our current situation at all, right? Obviously, it is tragic what many of our community have had to deal with, and it's been extremely stressful. I was saying that it's not unusual for a project in this industry to suffer a really hard blow, and then still come back and be a super interesting project that everyone loves. Just last week, I was comparing, the situation that Bancor is in now with the situation that MakerDAO was in March of 2020. So there are actually so many similarities that it's beyond uncanny. So for example, things like shortfall events and ineffective deficits, where people were getting liquidated for essentially $0. And also things like death spirals and infinite minting problems. Maker had all of these, right? I remember the first auction that so like one of the built-in mechanisms that MakerDAO has is actually very, very similar to the mechanism that Bancor has, which is when there's a shortfall event, which is what happens in borrowing and lending when the collateral becomes worth less than the borrowed amount. And IL in the case of Bancor's sense, when the amount owing to a liquidity provider is less than the fees that are generated. In both cases, both MakerDAO and Bancor mint tokens, except in Bancor's case, we mint tokens equal to the IL, and we give that to the liquidity provider. In Maker's case, they actually mint an arbitrary amount of MKR tokens and then auction them. And when they had this, really deep capitulation on ETH, and that ended up, forcing a bunch of $0 liquidations, they had this massive shortfall event, and they minted a bunch of MKR tokens, and they were going to host a series of auctions. And the first auction for MKR tokens, I think was 5 million of them, or 3 million. I can't remember the exact number, but someone bid $0, and the auction ended at a $0 bid. And so they just printed, millions of MKR tokens and just gave them away. And so, it's, and this was, people that were around during that time will remember what that felt like. The Maker protocol was, it was on the ropes. People had absolutely lost faith, not just in Maker, but remember, Maker was still it was the giant then as it is now. And people were starting to wonder if DeFi even made sense. Or if, and if DeFi doesn't make sense, then does Ethereum make sense? What would the Ethereum blockchain be without the protocols that are built on it? It would just be what? It would just be Litecoin. But they came back, right? Like I don't think that it's controversial now to say that Maker is probably the most respected, the most stable, the most robust DeFi protocol that we have. And I think that it is providing some inspiration for me personally for how to navigate dark waters in uncertain times. and you know, we've got other really great examples to draw from as well, like Rari, for example. You know, when they had their $80 million hack.
Right.
And you know, there have been so many examples that you know we can be inspired by, and I think that for me the take-home message is you know, don't give up, don't make the same mistake twice, and you know, continue to build. And
Right.
you know, I think that eventually, if we maintain the course and we continue to try and do the right thing, that we can rebuild these relationships, and that we can regrow this trust basis that we had, and redevelop the product in such a way that it is attractive, and that we don't run into these kinds of problems again. So yeah, I just want to say that there's precedent for it. We've got really great DeFi mentors to follow after. And I'm 100% convinced that if we keep, if we keep going in the direction that we're headed, and that we keep discussing the kinds of solutions that we're developing, and that we, just keep, I mean, as long as we stay away from, that temptation to sort of hit the liquidity mining button again and everything else, that we will find our way back to dry land. I think that that's kind of what I want to say about it.
Yeah, no, perfect. Thank you. Let's see. Okay, so we're coming up on an hour. I think I have like 4 or 5 more questions. If you don't mind, I'd like to at least address them.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thanks. Why is BNT the only TKN receiving any BNT distribution?
Yeah, partly because of if you read BIP 21, which is these proposals passed by the DAO become law, essentially, and I mean that in a very real sense. One of the things that it said is that it basically can't be made impossible to withdraw your tokens. And
Your BNT.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for any tokens. And so for the TKN side, we said, okay, we don't want to mess too much with the v2.1 contracts. And so if we allow sort of a bridge through version 3, then it's still possible to perform a withdrawal. For BNT, it's the same, by the way. You can't withdraw BNT from version 2.1 either. And you can, migrate over to version 3 and withdraw that way, the same as everyone else.
Right.
And so in terms of distribution, though, like, it's important to remember that it's not necessarily being given special treatment. BNT is in surplus right now. And so like any token in surplus, people are, it's possible to withdraw without suffering any shortfall. I'm not saying that this is excusable or anything like that. Obviously it's that there is a massive imbalance here. But I think that, it's important to remember that in terms of valuation, BNT holders have, already paid the price for this. In a way, the massive, liquidity mining rewards that were distributed to TKN holders that were then used to buy their own token back, opening the deficit and destroying the BNT valuation for 18 months is kind of the price that they've paid to be able to withdraw with a surplus right now. So it's, it's not like anyone is, no one's feeling very good about the situation at all. Both the TKN and the BNT sides of the community are suffering equally. And, we need to address both of those things simultaneously.
Perfect, thanks. Why not mint BNT for co-investment purposes, but not for impermanent loss protection?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and this is something that's come up like again and again. When we're minting for co-investment purposes, it's not true economic inflation, because it doesn't change the way that the BNT can be bought or sold. If we that's not always true. If we bootstrap the pool that was just kind of dump to nothingness, then obviously that was a bad decision, and that does cause economic inflation. But otherwise, it really doesn't have any price impact. Whereas when liquidity providers withdrawing or receiving BNT, especially during the, at the beginning of the bull market, and especially like, well into the bull market. I was actually watching people withdraw and receiving BNT as part of their IL compensation and not selling it, right? Like hanging on to that thing and selling the thing that they withdrew. And I think that makes sense. Like in the beginning, when I was looking at these transactions, I was kind of puzzled by it. But then I realized that generally the reason why people are withdrawing is because they're no longer looking to stay long on that particular token, right? They're either looking to take profit on it, or they are, exiting for some other reason. And so when some people were receiving BNT during that withdrawal, it seemed that some of them at least were happy with receiving that BNT position, and that was a really pleasant surprise. And I think that with that pattern of behavior, it really looked like it was a pretty good way to go about running an IL protection paradigm. But during the really deep capitulations, especially after the huge sell-off by one of the more prominent C DeFi institutions in the space, it did change market sentiment, and people did become a lot more fearful of not just BNT, but of a lot of altcoins. And so that propensity that liquidity providers had to hold on to the tokens that they were receiving just was no longer the case. And this is how we ended up in the sort of death spiral type situation. And so when we're minting BNT to bootstrap a pool, there is we're not putting it in anyone's hands to immediately sell it. When we're printing it and giving it back to liquidity providers, they do immediately sell it now, right? Often in the if they've got a script, they'll do it in the same block. And if they're just a normal user, you generally see them do it 1 or 2 minutes after their withdrawal is processed. And that has a very, very different consequence. So,
right.
I remember we did this AMA, I think with Future Finance, where we discussed, the meaninglessness of things like circulating supply and, total token supply and things like that. Whereas the distribution of tokens to people that are immediately about to sell it. So this is, true both of things like IL protection. It's also true of like team unlocks. So like Gnosis safes, for example, that release tokens over time, sometimes in large amounts. All these things, right, actually do cause huge economic inflation events, even if the token supply doesn't change. And when that selling pressure is realized, especially during a time where either liquidity is thin or sentiment is bad, it can just it just spirals out of control, which is what we've seen. So that's the main difference.
I think that was the call David, and that's on our YouTube. If anybody hasn't listened to that, that was such a great call. Like that was like the myths of the circulating supply call, right? That one was fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tempest, you're right. With David.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for answering that one. So, okay. So speaking about, like the BNT minting and the circulating supply and everything else and swapping your tokens, the next, like your BNT, the next question is kind of almost like a suggestion here. So instead of allowing everyone to withdraw 100% at once, what if you create a limit to the withdrawal amount? Would that help the traffic, and would it be easier to maintain the balance with liquidity, or would that ultimately be, the same result that?
Yeah, no, so something that over the last few weeks, this is one of the things that I was thinking about a lot. So, for example, one of the things that I had thought about is, and obviously, we're not going to do this now because the DAO has removed the cooldown. But I've thought about introducing something like a turnstile. So, I've used this word a couple of times. People don't know what I was talking about. But like a turnstile is these things on like the New York subways, the little bar that is in front of you that you have to kind of walk through that, effectively bottlenecks the flow of commuters in and out of the subway gates. And I was like, I wonder if we can introduce like a smart contract turnstile into something like the withdrawal contract that limits the number of people that can be in cooldown at once. And if someone's like sitting in the withdrawal contract but not withdrawing, that, you know, someone can enter the turnstile and sort of boot out the oldest, you know, the oldest person there or something, pay the gas to boot them out or something like that. So yeah, this kind of bottlenecking is something that is something that I thought about. You can even monetize it, yeah, moving forward, I do think it's okay to continue to consider these kinds of things. I think we need to be careful about creating a system where that's overly cautious about withdrawals and things like that. Obviously, we've kind of painted ourselves into a corner recently, but I'm confident about getting out of it. But I think in time. But I think in the future, I would much rather people just be able to withdraw whenever they want to, with exactly what they expect to receive, and not be worried about bottlenecking it. I think, there may be a requirement for it, that something like, no more than 55% of the protocol can withdraw in a single day or something like that. Which is, the scale of what we were facing at the time that the pauses happened. Actually, more than that. So yeah, like there are things that can that can destabilize a system like ours very, very quickly. But it's not just ours, right? Like, ETH 2.0 also has a limit, right, to how quickly you can unstake. The Chainlink network also, right? Can you imagine if 95% of Chainlink nodes decided that they didn't want to be Chainlink nodes anymore? Or if the people that were staking GRT against the Graph network decided that they didn't want to do that anymore. Like all of these tokens that serve that kind of purpose, they do suffer from problems if there's a mass exit narrative. And so yeah, we probably will need to be mindful of that moving forward. But I don't think that it's it's not something that I want to focus on right now. I would much rather focus on, getting the deficits, addressed and topping up all of the pools back to their high watermarks, and then once we know what the mechanisms are and what the exact product offering is in the long term, then we can say, okay, like what does a bank run situation look like now? And how can we predict for it? And are there mechanisms that we can build in, some sort of storm breaker or something that that prevents sort of catastrophic, catastrophic changes to the liquidity of the protocol, something like that.
Right. Yeah, that all makes perfect sense. Okay, we have two more. What development is taking place to ensure V3 makes best use of DEX aggregators? To increase fees as much as possible, we should be looking into alternative ways of generating these beyond people coming to the platform.
Yeah, so I think that speaks a little bit to what I was saying before about the protocol starting to move more into what sometimes is called a PMM, right, or a proactive market maker. It's not a very common acronym; hardly anyone uses that term. But someone actually, reminded me of a white paper just yesterday for a protocol called Amber, which is actually very, very similar to Bancor in many ways. It's got some slightly more exotic bonding curves. But Dodo is actually the one that I think about the most frequently, which actually allows for active pricing, like price quoting from its liquidity providers. And so these proactive market maker designs, I think, are much higher drivers of revenue than any of the AMMs could ever hope to compete with. But with regards to integrations on the, from aggregators and things like 0x and 1inch, Paraswap, AirSwap, CowSwap, all of these collaborators are, are basically, holding the phone for us while we, stabilize the ship and weather the storm. But all of these are basically ready to go. We just have to, align as a community and and right the ship. And then, yeah, these things should be ready very, very, very quickly. Airswap in particular has been extremely supportive, ever since the pause happened, and have been, giving us lots of positive messages and critical insight into, into what we can do moving forward. But yeah, very, very excited to be collaborating with these guys.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so
I
much.
should also point out, by the way, that with both of the both of these ideas that we have for the either the DAI remittance or the managed insurance fund, which might be composed of like a mixture of something like ETH and DAI, and that you receive ETH DAI payouts instead of BNT payouts as your ILP. In both of these cases, it makes sense to allow the protocol to access broader markets, right? Not just other AMMs, but maybe even centralized exchanges. And something like Airswap could actually be a really powerful collaborator when we need to, find a way to, to get the best possible swap rates on, the tokens that we have without the risk of being front run or anything like that. So yeah, I think things like Airswap and CowSwap are no-brainers moving forward. We would have integrated with them anyway. These conversations are very old. But I think, with regards to the solutions that we have, that we are looking forward to discussing in more detail with the community, I would say Airswap and CowSwap integrations are probably a must.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. The last one I'm kind of sensitive to. Are we guaranteed to get our entire stack back someday? And I kind of want to address that one myself as well, but I want to give you the opportunity to do that first.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to deal with absolutes and guarantees and things like that. I mean, obviously, it's the thing that I want. I want to rebuild the system in such a way that it offers exactly what it offered before, but in a different way, right? I want to be able to, go back to, these conferences and give seminars on, what was the first attempt that Bancor had at, establishing a paradigm where liquidity provision was, completely decentralized, and you didn't need any special knowledge or strategy in order to be safe doing it. And the first way that we attempted it with basically tokenizing the IL and using that as a way to manage the risk was it worked for a long time, but it wasn't able to weather catastrophic sell-offs. And so we developed a new solution, and now that solution is much more effectively managing and achieving exactly the goal that we set out to, but no longer relies on the BNT token to achieve it. I think that's what I want. And I want everyone to look back and say, and refer to Bancor the same way I just referred to Mako. That there was a cataclysm, and they staved off death, and came out with a much more resilient model because of it. I'm referring to Mako, but we should appreciate that it was a different protocol afterwards. Mako used to just be an ETH to DAI converter, essentially, right? You could borrow against ETH and nothing else. And one of the things that came out of that was the multi-collateral model, because the fiduciaries and risk analysts over there realized that being exposed exclusively to ETH was actually a really bad idea. So yeah, I think that we will be a different protocol after this, but the overall function hasn't changed. And so there is nothing certain in life except death and taxes, as they say. But I am 100% committed to bringing back a system where people are, where people are able to withdraw every cent of capital that they originally provided, plus all of the yield that they've earned in the interim.
And This is kind of where like my thought is too. Like we say everybody else, but like we're included in that as well. And I think that that's something that really hasn't been said. Like maybe I've said it personally to a few people. Like I know that I'm not the only one who is contributing to Bancor and has, you know, my link and my BNT and everything else on the platform. You know, like we are more invested in Bancor, and you know, like we are a part of the community and the DAO as well. You know, like
Yeah.
as far as like guaranteeing getting like giving somebody that guarantee to get their stack back, like I would love to have that guarantee myself. Like this is ultimately like what we are working for, and like there's this divide, like we're against them, you know, and I don't know, maybe I just wanted to take the opportunity to say like this isn't, it shouldn't be, or it is disappointing that it's almost like an us versus them sort of situation, when this is really when the DAO, like all of the members of the DAO and the community can really contribute towards something better than the situation we're currently in, is what I want to say, you know.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it's, and you're right that, you know, I'm in two minds about it, because like as much as I feel like, you know, that I am just an active member of the community, and you know, I've got a lot of friends here and a lot of people that I talk to and have met through, you know, through Bancor and other projects that are, you know, collaborating with Bancor. And yeah, to kind of have this narrative get built out that somehow I've benefited or been able to benefit from, you know, what's happening, is sad. And I have wanted to, you know, I guess I've kind of had a couple of off the cuff comments, and I'm not sure if people know if I'm joking or not, but yeah, literally everything that I own is in Bancor. I wasn't kidding when I said that I basically got a PlayStation 4 and a microwave oven to my name. You know, if the protocol fails, I have nothing, and it hurts me a little bit when people don't know that about me, but at the same time, I don't think that they should necessarily have to either, right? It's
Right.
you know, it's not professional. It's not. I don't think it's what people want to know. I think a lot of the time, a lot of the things that we hear is, you know, I've tried to say this before. I certainly said it the first time that we you know, discussed that the pause was happening and why it was necessary. That I was expecting there to be a huge amount of upset, and that it's important for people that are very close to the community and very close to the project and its development, that they're just going to have to grit their teeth and prepare for that. You know, we are going to be punching bags for a very, very long time. And I think, you know, a lot of the time people just want to know that they're heard, and that, you know, they want some of that empathy and to know, right, that they're hurting. And I think that that's fine. You know,
Right.
it's just something that we have to deal with. Right? It's totally understandable. But yeah, I don't want anyone to make the mistake of thinking that somehow, you know, that their loss is our gain, where you know, I am as degen as it gets, right? I have nothing else except what I have in my Bancor positions, and this is yeah, I think that people would be pushed to find someone that isn't more overexposed than I am.
Right. All right. Well, with that, you know, I had a couple of questions come in during the call, but I think what I'm going to do, Mark, is I'm going to send them over to you, and I'm going to reply to them. I'm probably going to post them myself on the discussion board. So if anybody pinged me or sent me DMs with questions, I'm going to get you answers, and we'll go ahead and put them a link to the discussion board that we put up on